Lil Nas X recently uh, set the record for longest running song at number one on the Billboard Hot 100, I believe.
Correct.
And before that, it was One Sweet Day from Boys to Men and Mariah Carey and Despacito. The
Mhm.
Bieber song that I think we talked about on the pod back
Yep.
in 2016.
Bieber and Fonzie.
But Old Town Road, it's a juggernaut. Uh, there's a lot of talk though that's come up from this because Lil Nas X, he knows how to use the internet. He knows how to get people excited for things, and he's been dropping these remix after remix after remix that have kept the song in the zeitgeist for this long and propelled the song to the longest running single of all time. What are your thoughts around that? And I think more importantly, what are your just thoughts around what the Billboard Hot 100 is at this point?
Yeah, well, as you said, Little Nas X is obviously generally celebrated for understanding how the modern internet works, just as a meme provider of memes and one to lampoon himself, but also through the help of his label and whatnot, gaming the streaming ecosystem as well as possible, strong as possible. And I mean, he had both Old Town Road and the original remix with Billy Ray on the 7 EP. And just a first track, last track, just a way to continue to drive those streams for the one track that was driving all of his success. And even if I think Panini's done pretty well for him, and even Rodeo to a lesser extent, the majority of Lil Nas X uh, hours logged is of course Old Town Road. And then when you do the Mason Ramsey Thug remix, and then the remix I don't even know if anyone heard with RM from BTS, the Soul Town Road. Uh, and then he's joked about Dolly Parton and Mariah Carey and who the hell else knows. It's a little hokey, right? And I think the question is, most people probably don't understand that that's how the charts work, and probably even more people don't really care one way or the other. So I guess you have to ask yourself, uh, is this a valuable way to gauge what's popular? Because you can look like the Spotify, the Apple Music charts, logging daily listenership. Old Town Road hasn't been at the top of those for quite some time. Yet because he's gaming these remixes that are all logging the original unit, he's still staying at number one. So I guess the question is it legit and does it matter? I think there's a lot of hubbub about the cheating with streaming, if you will, but you have to figure out what's the point, right?
Yeah, those are good questions. My answer to the first one is the game is the game, and if these charts are going to track in this way, and you can find a way to game it until they change it, I think it's all fair game to say, okay, I'm going to do this. I'm going to keep uh, this song up there and just kind of ride it out. The second question I care a little bit more about, does it matter at this point? And with all the ways that artists try to get their songs onto these charts, whether it's uh, through bundling ticket sales with the albums that people buy or merchandise or different
Yep.
things like that, experiences. It's I think the only time that you can really take something as culturally important from the charts at this point is if you really take a long range look and see what the trends are, because something like uh I don't know, it's very easy, I think, for an artist to put an album out, have a bundle with it, or, ticket, merchandise, something, and that gets it onto the top 100 chart. But then the next week, are they staying up there? How much
Right.
are they falling? What is the fluctuation from week to week? And I think that is really where you'll start to see what matters.
Yeah, and to that point, you obviously mentioned the bundling, all the kinds of bundling, and now it seems to the point where anyone who is on a major label that's gearing up for a big album is going to bundle by default, because and the labels primarily are the ones who care most about getting those number ones and staking the release dates early, which is generally what happens for most major label albums. We like talking about surprise drops a lot, but unless they're eccentric artists like Tyler or
Mm-hmm.
someone totally in control of their own destiny like Beyonce, it really isn't that common because the incentives aren't actually that great.
Right.
And in terms of the bundling, I guess, you know, we haven't reached a breaking point yet, clearly, but I think we have hit like that critical mass where everyone's doing it. But Brockhampton did it last year. They got number one with Iridescence through bundling of various sorts, and everyone's happy about that because everyone's rooting for them as a kind of underground group that's on a major label. But then when you have like Chance and DJ Khaled going at it over who bundled properly and will get those bundle units counted when they basically stream the exact same amount, it's basically nonsense, right?
Right.
But I don't know. Like, I think the reason I wish it was done a little differently or done a little better is just because honestly, I keep going back to how the stands react. Like, you go to @ChartData on Twitter, which is a great account, just tweets tons of chart information and plays and views and all that good stuff. Every reply to every tweet basically
mad
is tons of stands weaponizing sales and charts and calling out competition for flopping or outselling. They're outselling the others, and it's just really funny to see young kids, these stands, taking ownership of something that doesn't affect them at all. The status, the plays of music they already like, artists they already care about, and they almost don't care that it's all like a lot of BS sometimes. Like, I've kind of stopped caring about like total units ever since, streaming took over, because I mean, when Country Grammar or No Strings Attached went diamond, you knew that literally 10 million copies were sold and purchased, right? You knew what that meant. And even though we know exact formula of what streaming equivalent and album equivalent units are with streaming, it's still different. And I guess we're not gauging money so much anymore. We're gauging listenership. I guess that is good, knowing that something is still being listened to over and over again. That's why Drake will never leave the charts, because all of his albums get listened to all the time.
Yep.
But on the other hand, you look at those top album charts and you'll see like Billie Eilish. She's been top 5 basically ever since the album came out, right? Big album, huge album. She's a superstar. Then you look at the percentage of streams she's getting, and over 50% of the album streamed is just people listening to Bad Guy over and over again. So that album chart is basically being influenced by, the hit single. So that, I guess the question is that a problem, that the album chart's really just a song chart? Does it matter? What is it telling us? And just figuring out what we want these charts to tell us and communicate, I think, is kind of the important thing. And yes, the stands will argue about superficial numbers ultimately, but we want the charts to communicate something. And back in the day, they communicated, tangible reach of music back when we had to rely on SoundScan for like radio consumption. We didn't know of that. Now that we have all the data points, you kind of have to refine them and figure out what they mean. And tour bundling to influence those data points is kind of not interesting to me anyway. It doesn't really tell me much.
Yeah. As you were talking about the Twitter account, the Billboard or Chart Data Twitter account, and the way that fans react to it and comment on it, I was thinking about why fans would find it so necessary to like stream these songs over and over to propel their favorite artists to
stream Megatron.
Right. And it feels like it's this need for their favorite artists to be high on the charts, to be up there, just so that they can feel validated in who they choose to listen to or who they choose to follow. And I think there needs to really it's hard in I think today's age, when we see these people as so famous and we idolize them and we want to be recognized in some sense, like they are people, pay extravagant amounts of money for backstage access to meet people for like 10-15 minutes. And it's this idea that like, because they do well, I do well. And I think it's important for all fans to take a step back and to kind of think about, what do I really get out of this artistry? Because I think when it becomes something that is almost too personal to the point where it feels like if they don't succeed, then I'm not succeeding, or there's something invalidating about me, that's when it becomes dangerous. And that's when these kind of fights start. And Twitter, I think it's easy for that to feel like that's the way things are. And Twitter obviously is just a select few, and usually it's the loudest people and the ones who would scream about the most that are saying it. And most people don't take it that personally, which is important to remember. But I think there's this these set of rabid fans out there who really feel the need to propel their favorites to some level for their own feelings about themselves.
Right. And it's funny, as we've discussed before, obviously we know hip hop is by far the most dominant genre just in terms of sheer output, popularity, certainly dominates streaming,
Mm-hmm.
all that. But as we've known, hip hop is primarily driven by streams. Album sales, traditional album sales, just buying the album is pretty archaic in hip hop.
Mm-hmm.
Even Chance, who debuted at number 2 this week, mainstream rap superstar, 100,000 plus units, yet it was sub 30 traditional sales. Pretty crazy. A Boogie with the Hoodie season in the dog days of early January this year went number 1 2 weeks in a row with less than 10,000 traditional sales each week because he's a rapper. Meanwhile, you have, just bands, any kind of band, whether they're new or old, like Greta Van Fleet, right? Greta Van Fleet, I think, did like 80% of their huge opening week was traditional sales, even though they're technically a new band, even if they sound like an old band. And you think about like the best-selling artists still, like up until like Chester Bennington died 2 years ago, Linkin Park was the most dominant rock band. And I think these charts, these sales numbers kind of reflect the audience, like the older, less diverse audience that usually flocks to legacy rock bands. And, they still seem to buy music. Country artists, country fans still buy music. Yet they don't really pop up on the playlist. They don't linger on certain charts, but they will linger on the traditional charts. It's really interesting to see how different audiences of different ages and where they're from and what they look like, act in different ways. And finding a way to measure that, like how do we compare Jason Aldean, one of the best, most successful country artists we have, selling big 90% of his weeks are from traditional sales. How do we compare that to someone like Chance who gets, or Travis Scott last year, who gets like millions, hundreds of millions of streams in that first week? What is the difference? Is there a difference? I don't know. There's a lot too. And I think until like Rolling Stone released a new chart and Billboard made more and more charts, but I just don't know if more charts really matter until we find a way to, I don't know, maybe change the formula a bit. I'm not really sure. Just because I feel like I said before, I think streaming doesn't cheapen it because it gives the tail, but it doesn't tell you what the old measurements told us. So I don't know. There's what an album, number one album is these days really depends on who put it out. And this past week, it wasn't actually Chance. It was NF, a Christian-ish diet Eminem, who probably has a lot of fans in Middle America who bought his album. You look at the numbers, and that's what happened. So,
yeah,
fascinating.
I have a friend who was texting me about the new Tool album coming out. They announced a new single coming out this Wednesday with an album soon to follow, and they were like, I don't even think I'm going to listen to that single when it comes out. I think I'm just going to wait for the album because I like to listen to the music in context. I said, oh, well, you'll be able to stream it. And I found the date and sent it to him. He's like, oh, no, I'm probably going to go to the store and buy the CD or buy the vinyl. And I was like, oh. And it's just that there are, like to your point, those rock fans who really do like to listen to music in traditional ways, and how we can ever really know like what is the number one album and what that means now is much less significant than what it meant even 20 years ago. The music industry is just so fractured. One of the things that turned us on to this topic was a podcast episode from the New York Times, and one of the things that they talked about in there was paying attention to like the local charts,
from Shazam.
And I think that that's actually a really interesting perspective to think about, like what's popping off in certain areas as actually more of a symbol of what's a hit than like the more traditional charts at these points. Right. So, but it's still the idea of like things are fracturing down to even smaller and smaller bits to find what actually matters at this point.
Mm-hmm. Yeah, so if there's one chart that actually is worth paying attention to, at least gives you interesting insights into things, it's the United States Viral 50 chart on Spotify. And I believe they also have a global version of that. That's something that updates frequently. Like the Billboard charts update once a week, right? Mm-hmm. At least the main ones do. But these viral charts on the streaming services actually can maybe give you a little insight into things as they're popping off. We used to see SoundCloud top charts as the angle into that a few years ago, back when it was a more lawless space. Now it's kind of mainstream and streamlined by the labels. But even though Spotify and Apple Music are very much the game, because these charts are operating in a way just to capture not the biggest stuff. It's not Rap Caviar where you pay to get the song on there. I mean, number 2 on US Viral 50 right now is Jesus is the One, I Got Depression by Zach Fox and Kenny Beats, this hilarious joke rap. And it's only got 5 million total streams on Spotify, but it's been on the viral chart for about a week now. And that's fascinating to me because how did that happen? What got it there?
Right.
Hurts by Lizzo went viral off a Netflix trailer, despite the song being almost 2 years old. So I think how things blow up now in this age where anything can blow up, it's interesting, and hopefully these charts continue to evolve to capture that and tell us how things happen.
Remember when Rap Caviar first came out and it was like just like blowing up and everybody was like, oh, this is the playlist now. This is where you want to be to catch whatever's hot in hip hop. And then it slowly became commercialized and became taken over by labels. So yeah, it's sad. I think I kind of long for those days when it feels like things mattered a little bit more. But at the same time, the fact that there's so much good stuff out there is also encouraging. So
right, yeah. Rap Caviar died for me when they had Chopsticks by Travis at the top for like 3 weeks, and I'm like, no one thinks the song is good, guys. You don't have to take the Interscope check this time. You can say no thanks and take someone else's money. Like. They used to actually curate. It's frustrating.
Yeah.
It's got 11 million followers. What's it matter?